have as a wife a partner in the business that does not operate in amateur radio, but knows more about it than the average ham. I speak of Maylene, and Maylene is welcome to the Twin City FM Club meeting tonight. It's a relatively small turnout, unfortunately, but it's a pleasure to have you here. And it is with pleasure that I introduce our speaker tonight, Dan Fish, who has been in the ham radio business in the Twin Cities for well over 20 years. He's been involved with all phases of it, HF, UHF, VHF. He has been at Ham Fest throughout the Midwest. You probably can't name one he hasn't been to. It is with great pleasure speaking on a comparison of Japanese and Chinese radios. Dan Fish. Dan Fish.
Thank you, Mike. Everybody hear me all right?
Yep.
Mike has introduced me many times, and I appreciate it, and he's always enthusiastic, and we're really excited to be here today. And this is a fortuitous topic, and so I'm excited to talk about this topic that's near and dear to my heart. But I just want to go over and make sure, those of you that don't know me, of course, I'm Dan Fish, my wife, Maylene. We've owned Radio City now for 30 years. We've been doing amateur for 27 years. And the very first receipt of product was from Yaesu, and we'll be celebrating that October 6th. We'll have Dennis Machenbach up for our 27th year. We're kind of excited about that. And it's all because of the support that we get from the local community. This talk that I'm able to provide you tonight, I've been able to hone a little bit with the courtesy of being invited to the St. Paul Radio Club, where I spoke on part of the thing that actually is driving the introduction of the Chinese radio, which is internet sales. And shame everybody in here for buying other places, but we know that it's done. But we also appreciate the support that we get. And we want to show you, we hope, coincidentally, that the value added that we bring to the market. I've been an extra class licensee for many years. I've been hamming for 40. I'm a sponsor of QCWA. I'm a member of that club. I'm a member of the NOCA Amateur Radio Club. And in my heart, I'm a member of every club around. And you know, when we went out for field day, we had time to stop at 4 clubs. So we stayed on the north side of town. The previous year we went to the south side of town. And it's really a lot of fun to get out and see all the operators. But I have to tell you, I did not see a lot of intense operating this year. I just saw people having a good time, which I think is also a part, probably the main part of our audience. We were out at Sarah, and Dave Glass has always commandeered me. His Mike always, gets hold of me. Dave Glass gets hold of me and Sarah, so we'll be sponsoring White Rock for them, which is a special event station. I don't know if you're familiar with White Rock. It's the tri-county marker between North, South Dakota, and Minnesota. They operate right there. And I think it's been a while since they've been there. So Yaesu and I are sponsoring them. Actually, it's out of my pocket, but their equipment. And so this is kind of a fun thing that they're going to go out and operate in that area, and then we're going to try Split Rock White House with them as well. Well, it's an interesting thing, in a former life, many, many years ago, I was the Director of Quality Control for Ball Corporation, the data display division. And we, to make that real short, we were put out of business mostly by the Japanese. And their great electronic display devices. But in a couple years prior to that closing, we decided to do a lot of offshore subcontracting and procurement of electronic devices, electronic display devices. And so I got a chance to kind of track. So when Mike asked me to talk about the differences between Japanese and Chinese products, there's always this kind of thing where you think we know that what we're all talking about. And so I'm just going to define a little bit. What I intended to bring to you are the things that I feel that you need to know about the difference of buying, using, and your perceptions of Chinese versus Japanese radios, and the quality differences between those products. Because we are in the wild, wild west of procurement from China. And so a lot of responsibility falls on the users, particularly if you're on your own. So that's why I thought I would give you a little bit more of a general background, and I'm not going to try and bore you with a lot of details, but I had this opportunity, which is kind of unique, where I would go to Japan and I would see their operation and all of their factories and what they would do. And then I had to go back and report to headquarters about what I saw. Then they sent me off to Taiwan. I did the same thing there. Then they sent me off to Korea, and I did the same there. And then they sent me off to Shanghai and Wuxi, China. And the thing that if you go to China, if you're in the mode for it, you find out that in many ways they are a lot like us from their mental attitudes. And so I got along just famously over there. I very much enjoyed the company, I enjoyed the food, I enjoyed the hospitality. And there were some things that were interesting that I didn't enjoy. I remember my last written memo at Ball Corporation in 1985 was to the director of the corporation about if they didn't get their buttons in order here, they were going to get beat to death by the Japanese for flat screen televisions. And of course, I don't have to tell you what happened with flat screen monitors and all that. I fancy myself a little bit as a leading edge marketing type person. I enjoy that trend. And so that when you come in the store, you'll find, unfortunately, much to my wife's concern, I spend a lot of time talking with you all about what you know and what you think. Because this is a very exciting hobby, and the one thing that we have is this intellectual inquisitiveness about technology, the sciences. And so when you come in the store, you'll see all of that kind of stuff there. I never would have dreamed that the experience then that I had in 1985 would serve me so well when a few years ago I started receiving a lot of email from several Chinese suppliers. And for a long time, if you know the Radio City Group, we have been a member of a 5-store conglomerate called the Ampros. And I've been beating on these guys for years to get involved with new product lines and Chinese product lines. But I'm a very strong advocate of Japanese products. And I want to spend a little bit of time coming back to that because there's some key differences in the mental attitude of Americans versus Chinese versus Japanese suppliers that you will see and notice in your product lines. So, we have, or at least I have some unique capabilities then because of this opportunity to visit all these countries in outplacing and looking at the product lines then that we brought in. And the first thing you find out is if you're going to eat an elephant, you start maybe at the ears or some real small place that you can do this. And it's a very large supply base over there. And one of the things you find the Chinese do is that they centrally locate work in agriculture, you work there, and so forth. But there's some unique advantages to that, and that is
that if I want to build radios and I'm in Guangzhou, all of my suppliers will be in Guangzhou, and all of my competitors will be in Guangzhou, and all of the marketing people, and all of the freight and shipping will be oriented in Guangzhou. And then if there's a lot of money, then I have to ship it out of Hong Kong. So there's these unique pockets then around the country that allows for a little more unusual efficiency than we enjoy in the United States. That is, in the United States, you design a product. If Herb wants to design one, he's going to design one where he lives. He's not going to wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to move to Guangzhou and start a radio lab. He'll start it here. And so that's the key difference in mental attitude between Americans. The other thing is Americans, we're very capitalistic and we're very profit-driven. And so our approach to a design is a unique moment in time where we conjure up something and realize that we have a marketing opportunity to sell something. And then we do that, and hopefully it grows. So where we purchase goods and so forth is important. And the other thing that I feel that makes this a multifaceted problem is that it also depends on what's best for our country. We don't normally think of things like that. In other words, we're not very nationalistic, if you will, but I suspect that we probably better at least look it up in the dictionary tonight and figure it out. Because we are now in a global economy, and we're competing against very large, well-funded suppliers that are using the might of their entire government to accomplish a thing, where we are based with our financing and individual efforts. So a little history. Again, not to bore you, just a few minutes here. The U.S. started doing its labor shifting years ago by first going from major cities, Chicago and New York, and then going out to Schenectady and Lone Prairie and Cambridge, and then into real rural America. And then we still weren't saving enough, and then we started going to Japan. And then as soon as Japan understood what was going on, they started getting expensive, and then we moved to Taiwan. And we went right down the belt. Every time the dollar would get expensive, and then they would start to get smart enough, and we would move. Well, every time we moved, they, Japan, and then Taiwan, and then Korea, said, holy cow, we can't be without those dollars. And we taught them everything about the product line, so they decided they would make some too. So we left a trail of competitors at every juncture that we messed with. So in a way, we created our own monster. And so here we are, 2012, with a country that has a $7 trillion GDP, at 1.4 billion people, with a 98% literacy rate, and they export, I forget how many $1 trillion right now, it's going to come up in a minute, but we only export $180 billion, about 1/10 of what they export. Because the system is rigged against us. We can't put stuff out that way, but we can easily buy stuff into this way because of the way it's set up. So in the 70s to the 80s to the 90s, then we started having this work shifting, cost shifting going on from country to country to country. So for many years when we offloaded this, we could retain control of our goods. But at the end, every time we would leave, we would lose control of the goods. When we would lose control of the goods and the other people would compete against us, they would always take the designs that they were making, and they would hone that, alter that, and then reintroduce that into our community. So as we go down into Thailand, Singapore, Bangkok, all these places, I just suggest to you that keep in mind that we haven't gone to Africa yet. And that's probably the next very low-cost market. I don't know when we'll go there. We probably won't go to South America because it's just too politically unstable, dynamic. But that's also changing. Okay, enough of that. The main reason I wanted to bring that up was to just remind you then that if you see a product then that comes from China or Japan or Taiwan or Korea, you have a reasonable expectations to think that that product is just as good as Japanese products. Because that's where they got the idea. And that's where they got the plans, and that's the model that they followed. So now it all comes down to how they execute copying that model. And those of you that are involved in manufacturing today know that the secret to competitive products, if you go to Medtronic, you'll see that this is to a fine edge, is the process control that you follow. Once the designer has a design and you choose the components and you freeze that design, then you start to have deviations then of performance against the design. Unexpected things happen. And then that's tweaked, and pretty soon you have something that is essentially perfect. That is the Japanese attitude. So how they came by that was after World War II, Dr. Edward Demings was invited to Japan to set up a quality control process plan that he followed, that they have followed very rigidly. And they did that because the Americans were concerned about, from Europe, spare parts problem. If you bought a Renault, you couldn't get a part for it, and it broke. Part of the reason it broke is that we drove 80 and they drove 35. We wanted horsepower and they wanted efficiency. And so the markets were just a mismatch. Now, if I hope you come up and take a look, because what I've got here is I've got cabinets open and I've got 6, 7 manufacturers up here. And keep in mind that these 6 or 7 manufacturers are manufacturers that we have established a working relationship over a great extensive period of time in finding out how they do things, why they do things, what we don't like, how they can change and comply, and when they don't change and comply, because I'm not powerful, I'm just a little ham store. So they gotta wanna make it right. Because I'm just not going to buy it off. And so these people have made it right, and they make corrections. But even some of them have had process control problems. So when we bring product in, we test it up front. I look at the workmanship of it. I look at the durability of it. I look at the maintainability of it. Some of it's not so good. You got to remember, when in China, labor is very inexpensive, so it doesn't matter so much if it takes them a long time to fabricate it. It can be quite complicated in this assembly process, and they're kind of okay with that because they probably got to hire more people anyway. When you're in Japan, that is just not workable. They want you to pick this piece up and this piece and go click and move it on to the next operator. So they're much more careful. The other thing is that they don't care if the scrap rate is so high, because their objective is to make the thing that Americans and the rest of the world wants very desperately. Cheap, cheap, cheap. And if it's cheap enough, they know that you'll put up with the quality of it. The other thing is that you are uniquely qualified in this room to operate and correct reasonable deficiencies in your product. And so you're not as sensitive to that. It's almost a perfect marriage of their opportunity to introduce products to this country, our tolerance because of price, to work on it, that makes this work quite well. And so Chinese product is kind of taken off. Now, when we go to Japan, one of the things that we know in Japan is Japan has a very large ham radio market community in Japan. And as a result of that, when they brought in China and brought in amateur radio, they embraced that from a personal community. Ham radios making ham radio products for ham radio operators in the United States. And we had more money and we could import that product, and then they could tweak and find that thing. And what's happened is slowly, over the year, we have gotten used to all of the notations then that we have in Japanese products. Offsets, automatic offsets, CTCSS, DCS, memories, name programs, operating programs, this sort of thing. It's taken 20 years. Well, I've been with Yaesu for 27 years. I remember the first handy-talkie that I got from them, an FT23. Anybody remember that product? I'm sure you do. First surface mount components, rugged, durable. I could drop that from 3 feet. You would never do that with a handy-talkie before that. It would break. So they introduced that product. And so when I had, as a matter of fact, I've sold 2 products to Yaesu. They would come up to my booth at Dayton and buy one, so they could take it back and dissect it. And then I had the directorate level at Yaesu come and talk to me at the booth. And I would tell them, don't be so worried about the Chinese product line, because this is a very basic product. There's nothing particularly fancy about it at this stage. It's inexpensive, and it serves a wonderful need. And that use is that there are more people with Chinese radio. Now, I bet you half the people in this room have a Chinese radio. If you got a Chinese radio, there you go. That's in 1 year. Because you can afford to have a radio in a grab-and-go case or in a glove compartment, or you can afford, as people I know in this room have bought them for gifts for other people, as incentives and motivations, or to play with them, or to do balloon work. So there are lots of applications then that an inexpensive handy-talkie has worked its way into. But if you want to do APRS, GPS, and Bluetooth, it will start with a J. Now, how has Japan responded to this? If I give you an FT60 today, if you look at the label, it'll say chassis made in China, battery made in China, power supply, I don't know why, but that's made in Japan. So that is farmed up. And if you want to talk about some shoddy looking goods, I will tell you off the record, ICOM castings were terrible a couple of years ago. They just looked awful. And that's because they were made in China and they needed to have this rush. And so they let the cost go maybe a little too fast and didn't care too much about the beauty of a product. And we are spoiled in this right now because beauty does count. Okay, Echolink. If I talk to China about Echolink, no comprende. It just doesn't go in. I have one supplier now, one of my suppliers, TYT, who got his ham ticket in China. Now, it's very difficult to get a ham license in China because you have access to the world, which the Chinese government is not too excited about. So VHF they feel fairly comfortable that you can't even get to Taiwan with that product. So this is growing. Now this is going to be a great asset. We have another supplier that I'm working with over there that has just introduced to me dot matrix devices. Well, this is just really a breakthrough. Everybody else is on LCD, but this is dot matrix. And that means I can get 2 to 3 times the density on the screen. What does that mean? It just means more fun for us. We can do multiple things at the same time. But now, here's the downside of the problem. As an amateur radio operator, every piece of equipment that you operate, you are responsible for where it operates and how it operates. So even if I sell it to you, you're the one on the hook for it. Japan has gone out of its way, and as a result of the way that it operates, they are the shock cord for you. So they will know if it's a problem before you know it's a problem. And because of very good process control, the product is very predictable. In Japan, they are as likely to have intermod because of their population density as we are in New York. In China, not so. They don't experience intermod. So that's a new surprise waiting for us over the horizon. It will happen. Now, there are some other places like Thailand where there are 300,000 hams. Well, that would be exciting to see them. If they got into the market, God knows what they would do. It would be really kind of fun, exciting. And that's one of the things that this opportunity now gives us, is a real opportunity as exciting, low-cost, multi-dimensional product from multi-sources, so we have a whole new sense of competition that we can benefit from. The only problem is that the market size is kind of thin for a serious investor. So Japan would have a little bit of difficulty in sharing that market because, remember, at any one time we're maybe 100,000 strong users. Well, if you're brand new to the market, you might be happy making 2 or 3 or 5,000 pieces a year. But if you're in Japan, maybe not. So that market might lose its appeal to you. It's okay if the price is high enough, but if you're making, what, a bow thing is $69. Well, they make it for less over there, and then they put it in a box, and then they ship it over here, and then it goes through customs, and it goes on the UPS truck, and then it comes up over me. And then I've got this thing about still wanting to eat 3 meals a day and maybe only and still sleep 8 hours. So I like to make a little bit on a thing too, and then I sell it to you for $69. Who's getting what on the way? And you go, how much can there be in there? And the answer is not very much. Enter a Japanese radio. I got an FT8 that I sell for $439. Well, I'm ashamed to tell you what I paid for that. I don't want you to think I'm a bad business guy. But I mean, it's terrible. So I'm supposed to live on 7 points, 5 points. It's crazy. But they get to enjoy $200-300 worth of gross margin on that. Okay. Whoever said life is fair, it's not. But nevertheless, just to recap, Japan has developed ham-specific products. They have great process control. They have great design input. They have a lot of creative ideas. They outsource to China and Singapore and Taiwan. So they are the Asian USA, for lack of a term. I'll just make that up and say that's what they are good at. So here we are now in the United States. We might have an opportunity then to gain access to a broader market that makes things a little more fair back here. So I'm excited about doing that. Chinese product. Their product is based on land mobile radios. Because that's where the volume is. And that's when Motorola went in there and hired them, and Raytheon, and all these guys. That's the kind of stuff they made for them. So some of those terms then you pick up are clunky businessman terms, and we're not necessarily used to that. Also, we have a language problem. The Japanese have pretty well gotten over that, and the Chinese are working on this diligently. But we're coming from a pictorial dialect, where you basically draw a picture, if you will, for what something means, versus English, where we can write a very descriptive phrase. This is something would be very good at. We'll have to get him involved. But if I have to explain then to an American how something works, then we have this significant translational difficulty of terms that we have to overcome. So, China's not ham-driven is design, and Japanese is. So, forever, long live Japan, long live China. So when you pick up a product then and you see these stark differences on them, our tendency in American is to say, what a piece of something. Because we're function-oriented to what we want to do, not to what their problem is or their supply problem is. But we need to factor in then that these products then are different at that level. And what you'll see, however, is the penetration of Chinese product, and you'll start to see a very slow migration to products then that we want in our application. Performance. Okay, I want to go back to Part 90. FCC requires that manufacturers of product introducing product in the United States must comply with Federal Communication Commission standards that are well documented and pointed. If you have questions, just go back there and ask the guy in the striped suit who's got all of these wonderful answers that we ask Tim for help a lot, and he's able to give us a lot of assistance. We also work with the ARRL. I work with Bob Allison and Ed Hare, because we have to test that product, because they will say, yes, boss, it works. But the reality is that when you're in the ham bands, remember this. Part 97 requirements mean that at the output of the antenna product, that AC product, all harmonics, all outputs, all spurious radiations emanates right from there into that spectrum analyzer. In FCC, Part 90, you can actually make a product that can have a very resonant antenna here. Remember, they don't necessarily have dual band. They're starting to have dual band radios for businessman now, but that's probably going to be truncated and go away. Largely, businessman is single band. Simplex in the DHF and the duplex with the offsets in the UHF and high. That antenna can be resonant and act as a filter for anything that's bad going on in there. It's like another stage of filter. When you pick up a radio from China and it says, transmit from 137 to 174 and 400 to 490, you need to say, what kind of high output network is that? And I would say, broad as a barn. How can it filter anything out? Well, it does intrinsically because of the design and some feedback, as Tim will tell you about, but it is a problem. And so as a result of that, when you buy one and you're on your own hook, you need to be aware of, there you have a bunch of second harmonics, and third, and fourth, and fifth. And here you have zero, and this one, and a handy-talkie, that worst one in there must be, this is a 5-watt handy-talkie, must be down 52 dB in this particular case, because it has to be less than 25 microwatts, 25 microwatts or less. Must be down that much. If you have a mobile, depending on the power output, it generally has to be down 60 dB. Well, a Japanese product will go down 70, like that. Why? Operates in the hand pins. It receives wire, and they'll do that with a process called track tuning. So we can optimize reject, intermod, optimize the front end with track tune, varicaps in there that change the tuning and the cue of the circuitry in there. But it's very difficult to do that on the output stage. But then you're dealing with some pretty high power. So that little diode, after a while, just has to give up its little life and sacrifice itself for that resonance. So there's a lot of trade-offs then that occur in the selection of product line. So the next time you're tempted, and I'm not saying, look, but if you're a PSW and you know what you're doing and you got the equipment, God love you, because what we really need in this hobby are people that do that. So I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying that if you don't have that equipment, be on guard for that, because you are the one that's culpable or required to achieve that particular goal. All right, let's see here. Here I was afraid I wouldn't ad lib. Now I've ad libbed so much I don't even know where I am in the note. Okay, did that. Okay, I want to touch a little bit now, and I said earlier that this is a wild, wild west thing. The thing that's nice about China is very entrepreneurial, and so, man, if you want something and you have reasonable amount, you don't even have to have $1 trillion, a reasonable knockoff of something else. And that is a cultural difference in China that is perfectly okay in China. I mean, they don't feel guilty at all about that. But here, we're sensitive about intellectual property. They feel that that's, why waste the time redoing it? You got one, I copied. No problem. But it does create a bit of a problem because sometimes I can make something that I technically do not understand. And that happens a lot. And so you can make something that you, and so that takes a while then for that to work itself out through the market where people will say, oh, that's what it is. I mean, like my TYT radios, they have a bunch of gobbledygooky circuits in there on deviation. I don't know why it's in there. And they kind of don't either. And so what they do is they have got that circuit read working properly, and it's frozen. They don't change it. And yet you get in there and you say, boy, they could really do some damage in here if they didn't control that properly. So they have shallow experience, but they're very entrepreneurial. They have a lot of money control, and they will do anything to protect the renminbi. So the price will be whatever they want it to be. They have a delivery system. If I buy something from Hong Kong, it'll cost $5 Hong Kong to get here. Approximately $20. If I send it from here back to Hong Kong, say, I don't like that. I want a new one. No problem. We warranty. You send that. It'll only cost you maybe $80 to send it back. Because our postal system thinks they're capitalistic and they're in the profit mode. Over there, they're in the employment mode. They know that they must employ 1.4 billion people or they'll have little riots all over the place. So everybody works. And so the government subsidizes things to make it work properly. You need good export. What's stopping you in export? Shipping. Cheap American don't want to pay more. No problem, we fix that. So they fix that. So there you are, 1.3 billion people versus 311 million people. 96% literacy rate versus 99. Noise. And probably depends on who measured it. They export $1,780 billion of export compared to 184 billion for us. We're just a little pipsqueak. And in this country, if we want our greatness back, this is personal opinion, this is brought to you by my favorite candidate, which is not white. We need to find a way to export more. 90% of the world is out there that we can't reach because of the way that we export and the cost of export. Just to get a package from here, just a load of bricks from here to there. It's very expensive. We overcome that, we will open it up. China GDP is 7.3 trillion as compared to 15 trillion here. We still have a good growth rate, but they have an exponential growth rate. All right, picking suppliers. Now, how much time do I have, Mike? Are they following? Everybody following asleep here?
I'll take up to another half hour.
Okay. Everybody okay? Any questions I need to go back and clean up here? All right, so here's what we found. There are so many suppliers in the line that you can buy from that you have to exercise. It's like antenna selection. That is your first engineering job. So when you learn to become a ham radio operator, that's the first. The radio, you can find out from everybody that they have that kind of radio. But when it comes to the antenna, that's on your house. So that's your first engineering job. Well, the same thing then is that when you have a supplier, you have to exercise a method to screen out this hundreds of people that are willing to sell you a radio. Some of it is easy. So, I'll tell you what I do. The first thing I do is when people are business oriented and shallow, that is, when I look at a Chinese supplier, if they're only making 3 or 4 or 5 items, they're a little too early in the cycle for me. That means that they've only had a chance to copy 4 other people. Come on. So give me a guy that's copied 10 or 15, you know. The other thing is that we are readout sensitive. You know, we want LCD displays that tell us what's going on in the radio. I'll give you another hint. We want DTMF. Everybody goes, why do you need that? Well, because this is a part of the hobby where we're still stuck in 1980. You never know, we might have to make a phone call on an auto patch. But now we have Echolink, right? APRS, we have so we kind of have this area that we will continue, and I think that's good. I mean, I think that we do a lot of stuff with that. But that doesn't mean they all make that. The other thing is that they'll make pulsed DTMF, and I have accepted that on a couple models of radio, and it seems to work fine. Beep, it's just done, you know, and it either does it or it doesn't do it, so they repeat it. But we prefer in other words, we prefer a DTMF that when you hold on the button, it continues to output, and so we have more control with that. So that helps us kind of sit down and think. We like people that are, and there's exceptions to this rule, because I have one supplier now that I might buy their first radio. And I'm a little nervous about that, but it won't be the end of the world if it's bad. But they're very open now to what we want to do with them and what our community wants for radios. And as a result of that, they have been very open to incorporating a lot of the characteristics that we feel that you want in a product line. And they've made some creative steps in creating that. So we'll see where that goes. And so I'm kind of excited by that. Once you get a supplier, then you have this problem. And this is where you get to find out who you really trust. Well, hi, Dan. Yeah, I'll send you 1,000 of those things. Would you please ship me $63,000? Well, I was thinking maybe I'll send you 100 and then, on account. There is that step, then, there's a point at which you have to have enough of a relationship with your supplier that somehow, through an act of faith or whatever it is, that you know that when you ship him this bunch of money, that he's going to send you a bunch of good radios. And so we have established, that's why we spend an inordinate amount of time up front in a relationship. Why is that important to you? So let me divert a little bit and explain this. I have been with Yaesu since 1985. They've been my most ardent supplier. I've had the longest relationship with them. I have gone through 7 reps with that company. I've seen 3 major changeovers in their whole management process. I've watched them become Yaesu, Vertex Motorola, and now Yaesu. I called them up one time. I said, I have a customer. And just so you find that. My job is to serve you all. Now, they think that I'm there to serve them, but I'm not. My job is a value-added job, and this is really an old-fashioned concept of business. You want to double-check it, go ask her, because that's the way he operated in his business. That if I keep you guys as happy as I can, and you allow me to be reasonably successful, then I can be successful with my supplier. But if my supplier is in control of me, then you need to hold me suspect for what I'm selling. So my job is to listen to your needs, and if it's not a good piece of equipment, you all know me well enough that I'll tell you. Or at least I will say, it's got this problem or that problem or that problem. And sometimes we don't know, and you get to find out, and so you usually tell me, and then I go back to the supplier. So anyway, they wanted to talk to this customer directly. And I said, no, with all due respect, I don't want you to. I mean, I don't care that you talk to him, but he's asked me to intervene, and that's what I'm going to do. And I said, let me tell you what, oh, thank you. I will now, I'm not no longer. That I have seen reps come and go, but my customer is still here. And so that's, after 27 years, I can say that you guys have all lasted those reps, so which is kind of good. Okay, so, but controlling the process then becomes a very, very important thing to do that you do all the time. And you control the process on the product coming in and how you pick it, and and everybody has problems. You always have problems. It's what you do with the problem that's the most important. Okay, the other thing that you'll find on this product line is, I look at, is general workmanship, board cleanliness, board fabrication, how the pick and place machine is working, how many modifications there are on a product line, and there's always going to be some. But those are the drivers. So that tells me then what kind of a reasonable supplier I have. Once we get past that, I'm concerned with maintainability and warranty considerations. It's easy for them to say, I'll give you a 1-year warranty. What is my latitude if they don't follow through? So the first thing I make them do, which often surprises them, is that I will not set my first order until I have the key failure rate items. And if they won't pick them, then I will pick them. And I suggested then that it's better if they send me spare boards. Because I don't know, and that's we're both going into this agreement, but I got to cover you all, and I can work on it. I need good schematics, and it's how they follow through on that. And TYT, by the way, does a marvelous job. Durability, reliability, controlling the transmit ranges, the adjustment in processes. So they can make this thing real good, and then they send it down line 1, and Chan sets up the deviation this way, and Hushang sets it up this way. Well, that just won't work, because now I get in and you're not happy and you think this is great. Then I end up having to sort product and reset them, and it's just a big pain in the rear end. Freezing the design and securing specifications. It's a tough thing to do, but when you're a little supplier, so what we do, we have a real simple process. We go through and we look at the product, we measure it, we throw it on the spectrum analyzer, and so what we have is an HP 8921 spectrum analyzer. With spectrum analyzer and tracking generator, we have high quality cords that we use for measuring, because lengths are a problem, connector interfaces are a problem. They all contribute to noise. We have an inmet 30 dB 50 ohm 10 watt dummy load or attenuator, and then we have a 100 watt attenuator and a Comet CA 500 impedance meter, and of course current digital voltmeter, Motorola on IFR service monitors, so that we can measure this product from time after time after time, send it on to somebody, and they will be able to reasonably measure the same thing within, I suppose if I had a really expensive lab, 100K, we could probably get down to 0.5%, difference. But I'm personally happy at 3. Okay. Now, some of that will come in technique, noise in the lines, and all of that kind of stuff. So, and what does that mean? That means if I might measure a 52 dB at 49 or 54. So I'm kind of in that noise area. And I'll ask other people to measure it for me. So, if you're importing, make sure you test. Make sure that you pull samples. AQL, I use mill standard 105 or 98, 958, I think it is. It's been a while since I've done it. I have a sample table. I get 500 pieces in, and I'll pull the sample. What a job, what a chore, but you've got to do it. And sometimes you can be somewhat selective. I'll go by the last lot. If the last lot was very good, then I will test the critical components. I'll do a couple through, and then I'll just take a look at it and so forth. And I do power supplies. We've got QJE power supplies up here, very critical to do that, and so forth. But we take the first radios that we get, and we hang on to them, and they are called our purple pillow samples. We just take that product and lock it up and say, because sometimes something will happen you don't know, and you don't maybe have a test for it, but you can go back and say, I'll be darned, this one rattles the same way, or whatever. Like with the Baofeng, when it gets really hot, the bottom line of the text gets gray. So we had to go back to the purple pillow and say, yeah, my God, it does that one too. So it's at least consistent. And that used to happen a lot on the VX7, by the way, did that. So heat makes LCDs leaky. When they get leaky, a few microamps will cause the polarization of the product, and so it will clog up and so forth. But, okay, when you buy direct, you assume the responsibilities have no effective warranty. You have a $10 to $20 incoming freight and 30 to 80 going back. I'm just tossing that off so you know. Radios must comply with Part 15. So we buy Part 90, which is business band, because it's too difficult to get in and talk with the Chinese about doing Part 15. But if you have a Japanese radio, in the amateur radio community, they will only have Part 15 on that radio code, because they are making it to Part 97 and FCC standard Part 15, which is radiation characteristic. And the factory located in California is the FCC touch link for that if there's that compliance issue. The FCC has a link to Santa Clara for difficulty. Trying to have a link from the FCC to Wuxing through a language barrier is very, very difficult. So, but just watch for Part 97, Part 15. We insist on Part 90. But at some point, Part 15 would be more than adequate for our needs. Okay, so we have suppliers then that we have pioneered, and I have Baofeng. If you want to look at them, and I'll be up here and I'll talk to you about these. But what I want you to observe is I want you to take a look at the workmanship in all of these products, and I think that you'll be impressed. And I will tell you that Japan has set a very high bar for quality of product. Japan has set a very high bar on understandability and convenience of product. China does not come up to that standard. It's adequate, but you're going to have to work at it. Once you get it, you'll be fine. Japan has excellent process control, so that you know that if you bought FT270 Serial 1 and Serial 1000, unless there's very doubtful there will be a change in your process. In China, the Baofengs will come in with two languages, Chinese, which we don't really care about, and Hong Kong English, which is easy to understand. The next lot came in with just American English. The UV3s came in with a single display, then the next lot came in with a dual display. And it'll just, whatever they decided to run that day. Now, you can say, okay, that's a don't care. Maybe I don't care about that. But if you've approved Part 97, and there's a second harmonic problem, and it changes the fabrication of it, now you're in trouble. And you've got to be on guard for that. All right. Closing comments. There's a marketing pause going on right now in the United States, and it's brought to you by the introduction of Chinese products. It's a point at which all of a sudden we're all contemplating what all does that mean. We also have changes in our political system, which is adding to that difficulty. A hot summer and a drought. So the marketplace is kind of lethargic right now. And it gives us time to contemplate what it is that we need in product and where we're going with things. Radio City has also joined the trend on internet. We've always had that, but we're going to be doing a lot more posting of product, a lot more posting of events on our front page, so please stay tuned. And we have some handouts for you all tonight. whatever you want to take with about I have it. Oh, they're orange. Oh, okay.
Upcoming email.
On September 15th, we have a garage sale. And also, we'll be doing some astronomy that day, so we call that StarQuest. We will have a bunch of white elephants out there for sale, and things that I no longer want to fix, or maybe I just don't have time to take a look at. We would like to see club table out there. It'd really be nice if there was a variety of clubs. One thing that we can use in this hobby are more participants. We need some more grist for the mill. October 6th, we have our Yesu Day, which we've been doing on and off for, gosh, I don't know, 20-some years. We've skipped a couple years in there. But this will be celebrating our 27th year. Dennis Machenbacher will come out. And on November 10th, we will have our official 30th year celebration on that particular Saturday. And then we have some things planned for the rest of the year regarding some speakers like remote operation and so forth. Okay, so let me stop there and ask if there are any questions that I can help with.
Yeah, I'll give you one.
Yes.
I think you've answered it, but I want to make sure I know the answer. I'm getting this question all the time, and that's what precipitated me to invite you tonight. And I'm so glad the two of you did come out. I really appreciate it, because you guys are doing a great job of trying to keep us informed. This radio has a Y on it, means a Yesu, or an I meaning an icon, or a K meaning a Kenwood. This one here, just a big C, a lot of different Chinese radios. This one here sells for $99. This one here sells for $199. Now, quality control, you really did a terrific job in emphasizing quality control is big over here. And it's really not only good at big quality control, but they're also got some great standards that they stick very close to. They value our business. These people are trying to break the door down and get our business. What is the basic difference besides quality control between the dual bander that sells for $199? I know it doesn't. It's a little more than that, but let's say $199. And it comes to Japan, the $99 one that comes from China. What is the basic difference? Is it quality? Is it the material that goes into it? Or is it that these people are just trying to sell it as a loss leader to break our doors down? Question mark. Go for it.
You know, it's a really easy question to answer.
I try to only give you easy questions.
So, the price of anything in the world is directly proportional to the willingness of the buyer to pay. And when I want to sell you an unknown brand and ask you as a consumer to take risk in consuming the product, I have to make it worth your while. If I'm Japanese, I justify my price because I have all of these features and engineering people that I have to support. So the cost of the product that I sell is based on the profit structure that I need to have to keep my doors open. And indeed, that is the very problem then that comes to pass in almost every single company in the United States or Japan or Taiwan that eventually, like the mole that is eating up the angleworms in my yard, raising all kinds of hell with me on that, will succumb because his appetite is too large to get supply of worms, and he will die. And that indeed then is what will happen to these product suppliers. And why those guys have the potential of winning. And that is what has gone on forever and ever and ever in our economy. So I don't think I'm telling anybody anything new here, right? So if eventually, when a competitor comes in, they have lower, less costly operating structure, and the guy with the heavy operating structure is no longer valuable enough to pay that, and so you choose to go this way, and they're in trouble. So they have to alter their operating structure in order to comply. And indeed, on the FT60, Yaesu has complied. And gosh, I could go on about that, but it probably wouldn't be fair. But ICOM has also done this, but they did it a lot sooner. So, you could make an argument that they've been overcharging you for the product for years and been able to get away with it, and you've been satisfied with that. You make an argument that the other guys are too cheap. The truth lies in a blend somewhere in there. And so this always happens. So, there are Chinese that make very low quality products, but for the most part, I don't find that to be true in the business band area. I find that product to be adequate. It's when that product blurs into a consumer product that the price really gets out of control to the performance and the reliability, where price is the driver and functionality isn't. So I don't know if I've answered your question a lot, but you're probably overpaying for this and underpaying for that, and the price should be somewhere in here. But they're being subsidized, and they're getting back their investment. Tim, do you think that's fair what I'm saying?
Yeah, and if you put it in perspective, how many people remember Prime? The AT600, purchased by our federal government for a lot of certain agencies. It was a wonderful radio. Remember what happened to Prime? They had all their radios built in China. They were designed here in the U.S., brought the technology over there, set up a factory. They got in a bad way with each other, and in one night, the factory, all the documentation, all the spare parts, everything burned to the ground. What value of that is that radio to you at that point in time, even though it was 2/3 the price of the other at the time? Dan said it very well. It's not just the equipment; it's what's standing behind it. That's what's really important to us over time.
Yeah, that's right.
And yet I come to you, who I dearly trust, and ask your advice many times, and say, hey, wait a minute, you're covering me on all of this. So should I really be too concerned that I'm only getting paid under market for this radio here? Because you're going to be around for a while. You're going to cover that radio. I can always get it fixed at Radio City. Should I really have to be too concerned that I'm getting a bargain over here?
Well, I think that you have to judge the product in a different way. I don't think that you can judge the product totally on price, because, I mean, that's not totally fair, because as we discussed, and maybe just to go back and review on it, if I pick up a Baofeng radio or a TYT, now we went out and had an English manual made for the TYT. That really helped on that particular product line. But if you pick up some of that product, the abbreviations don't make sense, the programming is clunky, there's a lot of rough edges on the product. Now, once you get it programmed, it's marvelous. And so I would ask you then, what is it that you want your radio to do? With the Japanese radio, you pick it up, and from the moment, I remember the time that this is when I worked at Ball, and I would go back and tell my corporate structure, you guys are in a lot of damn trouble, I'll tell you. You pick up a camera on a Sony, you unpack a Sony box, the product, the bows, the cables were wrapped in a silk bow. The instructions were here. And up until that time, we couldn't hang a fender on a Ford. So they changed the landscape of this on explanation. The Chinese are to Japan where the United States was to Japan. So, you know, that has value. Now, I don't know how much value you have. So, let me just go backwards now. 1950, Leave It to Beaver. And you're in the basement. Did you really care what that thing looked like when you made it? You were so excited that you had a mic amplifier and a preamp that didn't feed back on it, and you were just, that was great. So that's a value judgment then that's difficult to make. But when push comes to shove, whatever you end up with has to be a reliable, predictive performer. And I suggest to you that, like it or not, that and that are roughly equal. At least, I will say, at least what I brought in. I can't answer the question. 4 different UV5s. Well, I don't know who made them. I know there's a Balvin UV5. I know there's a Barrow UV5. I know there's a couple other companies of UV5. I don't know. You know, and I've already told you they love to copy. So one guy makes one and then they copy it and they go on. Might be fine. So,
But if you're a Mike
here
Sigelman,
you know.
But if you're a Mike Sigelman, you don't mind spending a couple of extra dollars and not have to worry.
Yep,
This is still going to be the best.
that's exactly right. And
I
so,
can demonstrate it another way.
Wait, now remember, he's coming from yet another direction.
This sits right here. It's an analog and digital radio. I imported it directly, and the manual was in Chinese. It took me months to figure out what this thing can do. The specs were supposedly excellent specs, and I didn't know you had all the capabilities, and I kind of scrounged, and I was able to check. It doesn't do what the original spec says. So yeah, when you pay a little bit, and when you import what's over here, you're not really getting something that you easily can look in a book, like a good spec, and read and understand and program. The programming of this was in Chinese.
I hate to do this to you. We've got to get out of here in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Oh.
Just help to
Let
explain.
me say, save your questions. Come on up and talk to Dan. You got 10 minutes before we wrap it up. But I want to thank Dan and Maylene so much for coming up here tonight and taking that.